Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Poetry Africa, the 25th anniversary. You are here live with Musa Hlatshwayo, the creative director of City Sounds and Poetry, and two poets, Pota and Sindiswa Zulu. We will now go live to City Sounds and Poetry, and when we come back, we will have a robust discussion with the creative director and the two poets and our panel members. Enjoy the film.
Olha raso. Ah, eu tive ali raso gatfuthi. Uya purazo. Iya purazo gat. Maget. Maget sana. Arasu banyak saja apa yang kira-kira. Maget. Out. Papel. Nago material. Vai ter la capela foto. Abanye abanokubhala imibhalo emangalisayo. Uxakwe uma bengasanakiwe. Ngoba siphiwe izimbungi. Zikwazi ukungena ecathulweni zabaswele maqede kuzwele zona. Iyamangaza imibhalo yabo yoxole ekubeni izidliziyo zabo igcwele inzondo ngoba bababo. Abahlula isonto bafulathela amakhanda namuhla basakhonjwe maceleni. Kodwa ithusa kakhulu imibhalo yezimbungi yoxolo ngoba bayakwazi ukuba noxolo kubona bengazikhiphile kubantu. Iyasimangaza imibhalo yabo yothando ngoba abagcini ngokusiqhamukela nesibese ngacabanga bakhama nesixazululo kwizinkinga zalo. Kusithuse kakhulu uma kusomunye wabo ekuthiwa usikhonge ngentambo emqaleni. Ngisibuze kanti izikhondla zisukini kubona zibalaphe ngaphambi kulabo abagulayo hlezi lesi sifundo. Sokuthi ngaphambi kobashaya ihlombe kuyomazi sikwazi nje nathi ukubheka umyalezo. Ngoba kwesinye isikhathi banokusho izikhondlo bemamatheka kanti inhliziyo zabo zigaya izibuzo. Esinye sesifundiswa mfethu
Avule nje yami.
Ubomxaka umxwayi nompheki ungakwazi ukunambithisa kwesidlo sakhe. Uma kanti izinkondlo ziyaphilisa bizana imbongi ivusa baphilise kakhulu emphefumulweni. Izikondlo zidala kakhulu ngeminyaka yabo. Izolo bengiza inkondlo ngokuhlobo kuphila amangcwabeni ngathuka. Izibongi zikwazi kanjalo ukuphila nokufa singenavalo. Thina ke izibongi izulu asikaze salibona siyazi ngabanye benu. Yazi uma bebhala banokusibhalela umfanekiso walo hlome ngezigilosi. Uma kanti isakhiwo seJerusalem akusonele sazi ngezikondlo zabo kuyomele balibhidlize balakhe kabusha ngiqinisile. Uma zikhona imbongi nizishele zingayeki ukubhala ngoba izikondlo zabo mhlambe zoba iBhayibheli ezikulwane esilandelayo. Okubuhlungu abantu abakwazi ubukhulu beyimbongi. Okwenza mase ihayile bafuna ukuzikhokhela ngodumo sebalaphile emphefumulweni. Ngizonga ngazuthi izibongiza abantu abathile bethu abafumbathisa ikhambi lapha abagulayo enyameni. Lapha abagulayo nasemoyeni. Lezi zikondlo bazibhala banokuyibhala beyisusela esibonakalisweni. Banokubhala behleli phezulu neziganyezo ezibhakabhakeni.
Yaqondisa lokho
imbongi yazithobela kusuka kuze kuyophuma phezulu esitabeni. Niyabona abafethu njengoba ngihaka kanje nami ngangomunye wezibungu. Kodwa umnjalo bempilo bangikhiphe epenini bangikhombeza imayini. Okwakobani uhlezi uhlala ushayela
Basalomtaliyani
nangoje etafuleni.
Basalamo.
Mfethu ukona ko brother qeda kuthini uthando lokhaya. Mhlawumbe phendula izikondlo zabo nokuchaka ukucupha inhliziyo zodadewethu. Ngisibuze kanjani ngoba izikondlo zingumkhuleko ufakazi usabanguni ethuneni. Bro la kukhona usathi isikondlo sizidala ngivule amehlo ingisisukile. Lana bafethu ngithunyiwe njengoba ngihaya kanje. Umdala uthi ngizotshela ukuthi izikondlo sezifikile. Kwathi kuyodinga imbongi niphefumule nikhululeke nasemphefumulweni. Leli qiniso elikhulunywe ngumfowethu obesahlala iminyaka ejele. Uthena ukuba imbongi zazikhona ngeke ngaba ngekho kule ndawo. Futhi zazongiguqula umqondo ngaphambi ukuthi
nabo makayenza.
Ufaka nodadewethu wathi yena nje ubengafundisa esibhedlela. Ubedinga ukulashwa emphefumulweni. Ubonga le nkundla izoyidlala emsakazweni. Uma kanti sikwazi lapha abakude ungani siganiwe ithuba. Abafundise
Pura sbu.
uma kwanje kubona imbongi hayi.
Pura sbu.
Yamashe inkondlo idasambe bethu. Imbongi ziphiwe bethu. Zikwazi ukungena ezigasini zamagula amaqede kuzwele zona.
Ngekho sasingekho ngiyagomela lokho usekhulumile wakhe amagula uyadela kodwa umama wazala lensizwe engabe mfowakhe aqhamukaphi yazi yacikoza lensizwe ngezwe kubila amathumbu ngicabanga leyo mama lele sibhedlela
Uyahamba mntamnyama. Mntamnyama.
kanjena
Uyahamba.
ngempela sibhedlela bayagula abasakwazi nokunyakaza nokubhethe singile lasifungatha yizwe inyembezi ziyehla ukuthi aphume igazi
Malume, awusifake la. Ngakungena la. Sangena la.
Ngiyibeka kanjena ngizwa kusinga kimi kodwa bayadela labo mama ngithi babe ngekho sasingekho nalingekho kodwa ngiqiniso lithi indlela ibuzwa kwabaphambili bese ngithi mina indlela ibuzwa kanjani kwabaphambili angithi bona laba abaphambili kufanele ngabe sibuza kubona indlela yibona sebesifaka ehlathini
Ngamathupazi wena.
ngithi mina ukubani kuthiwa ngangikwazi ukukhuluma manje ngoba ngangilona ke negaba Nkosi yami sengoze bese ngihlalela ke ngisonga izandla ngisena lokho ehleli inkomo akusenani ke mfethu noma usuphumile kodwa ke phela kulungile abafuna ukunikeza imbongi ithuba angithi imbongi babonesa ngathi ziyadala ukhuluma njalo olubaluleke kakhulu ngikhuluma nje lapho ufethe eduze kwami uyafunga ugomela impela ukuthi ukubani kuthiwa bengazange ngivuke usinga lokuphendula mnyaka baba ngingakwazi nakwazi mhlawumbe besingaze siyokwehla singakhulumisananga ubuntu abukho kumuntu uma ngakabuyi ubuntu eAfrika inkingi kumakhelwane mfethu umakhelwane wami kanjani sisuke ephoyini
Yaba base.
emakethe singakhulumisananga
Yaba
ngale
base.
mfowethu ngithi abuye umuntu kumuntu
Yaba
mfowethu
base.
nginethemba
Yaba base.
ngabuya kumuntu kodwa ke oh hey
Yaba base.
vele phela umhlaba uyagoqa uyasongolula esakamhlaba sayivela kamhlaba sikhuluma
Yaba base.
basizotshela ukuthi mfethu uyazama
Yaba
impumelelo
base.
yakhe iphenduka iqala kubo umakhelwane jabulisa
Jaba.
ukuthi ujikanelanga
After Robo.
Manget, into ayazi nje ukujikanelanga
Yeah, Yaba base.
angithi uyambo usayitshela ukuthi usele seqhamuke petrol mango juice kuzo 100% athi yazi lo mfana beduke nje lithali behlazanyana neyeva ihlokonyana ave ayitshela athi ngiyafunga ngiyagomela wemakhelwane
ngena makhelwane.
fanele wavuka etohweni
Utsilunana bese
khuluma nje ubhizi kalukhasina beka isipayithu ibhika yena siyashintshana yena ama-hips silendene ifaka yehleka imamatheke kodwa thina ezethu ikhona shuthi akayiboni impela lo mfana ngathi uyasixwasa umakhelwane kahle kahle kathi yini ayifuna kuthina ngithi mina mfethu usukhulumile wakhe qamagula nami ngakusenani ukuba bengiyimbongi bengizohaya kodwa ngamagama asedlulele kwasi
Uzoshaya imoto entsha lo Magethi.
Esikhathini eziningi ngihlele eduze nomsinsi siqabamanekile. Imiko uzimilela imicabango emqondweni iya ngokugxila kayisiphuki bukala. Kunokwenzeka ukuthi ulwandle saselicasule ngendlela engabekezeleki mhlala usikhafulela belungu.
Magethi mama.
Mana kancane lwandle ake sikhulise. Ake sijabule yosiza ingubo madoda kushintshe kwakungenje Zulu sangekwaba nje. Usize sasilibona mihla namalanga esasingalazi xa kulula ukubuyisela isikhathi emuva ke ngafisa. Kakusanqaka zona izingede kepha umdlalo wezingane ugabha iyana phansi kweziyembe. Ilupheki yakhathaza. Musana ukwenza sengathi kanazi. Kwadliwa izinkomo zamadoda la. Thina yethi imfuyo wawungasoze wayibala ebhukwini lediphu kwakuba ngumshonisalanga njengokubala izinwele ekhanda elingenampandla ungesiyo umvelinqanda. Sisholo thina sike sanamasi. Yaqhamukaphi imfenye yasiqedela isivuno Zulu khuluma. Zikhona izidalwe ezaqhamuka nobukhulu sengathi kanazi. Bezingcono izimpi bezila sisodwa bezixazululwa kuphele. Umphumela kuba khona kwabaphuculi imvula yendlala inkanankana yezifo nokuchitheka kwesimilo kanti ke nokulahlekelana sisodwa kaselula ukuhlukanisa intshonalanga nathi kodwa Zulu mina ngingeze ngakusola kakhulu akulula ukungalandeli lapho umnotho wakho wayangakhona ngoba abanye bazikhanyisa izindlebe nje kunokwenzeka ukuthi bangakweba kwebiwa ngithi yenike Bangathi izihambeli zethu zinesikhathi eside zilapha kanti izokwakhela ngezithiba zenye umhlola. Thina isisu somhambi besisazi singengakanani singangentswa yenyoni pho laba bacobezele ngangeyemkhoma imkhaba sixexulelwane ngempela sifelane. Umnumzane thizeni waseNgilandi unethezeke emzini kaMnguni. Ngabe maye uhlele esigcikini somnumzane yini?
Balesi yawoza mama.
Sizobuyela endaweni izikomisho zaphambana nani ngaphamba bani. Yaqhaqaniselwanga induke kaluseni. Vulana amehlo simnyama thina.
Oza mama wazamuhle mama. Sanda moya wakho mama.
Kenani ke nifunde ukubangula ivangeli ngikhiphe inhlupheko ngonyembezi. Nyambe ngathi basukasule siselwe komalume ekuchitheke egula linamasi. Thina besakhe imkhonto ibuqule siyabazi. Ikolito loli asiqabuke pha. Iphela sasihlonipha imvelo kaMvelinqanga. Ngoba nake nasidlalela izinkinga mhlazane nisiqhatha nemvelo. Maphekula ubuqilo obungaka nakuthathaphi. Ngifikelwa iyona yonke lemcabango eduze nomsisi nje ngibuka isindonga zakithi zodaka ezala ukuphahle kwayidilike. Kwelezulu bengiqeda ukuhlanza impahla zentokazi engiyisebenzelayo zangasese ngiqoqaqoqa nasemakhabetheni ayo. Ngifice umazisi wayo ngalunguza. Maye ngiyishiya ngezinyanga ezimbili njengoba iqhethile nginomuzi wayo mina kusayiphupha elibukeka kalififi ukwakhela abazali bami. Mina ikusasa lami kade ngalidela liyohlala njengephupho kwazise uma sengiqede ukuhlakula abazali bami isikhathi siyobe sesingishiyela ukuthi ngibekele abantu abami. Ungazwakala sapolitiki ezindlebeni zabathile. Ngisakhamuzi esicasukile eqinisweni kanginamuzi. Pho nginandabani ngoba inkululeko yokuzikhulumela ngoba sihleli nje kusengasukuma indoda eyodwa la. Isitshele ngoshintsho ozoqeda usizi emva kwalokho sifuna izimali zamakhadi obulunga. Abangahlupheki baziveza njengabahluphekile bethi balwela abahluphekayo. Zulu wongenje wena ukhona wakona. Ufunela ungena emaphalamende yabakithi sibuzeleni zayaphi izinto zethu ezathathwa la. Lezi zinalandi zingezathelelwa ngegazi lamadoda nabafazi. Umenzovana yosizi mhlabathi bangobandlululo kungasibona bonke ababuyile. Sawubona komishona yamaqiniso unjani kade ngagcina ke sibuyisayo. Kwathiwa izikhali kazilahlwe olwandle kodwa impi ibukeka ingaphelile. Uthingo lenkosazana esafanyiswa nalo emehlweni. Ngifunisisa umbalo njengamkulo ukuthi ukhona yini. Khathi sibe Zulu izikhali zezandla ngeke zisasiza ngoba vele khona impimpi la. Zulu omhle kakhulu. Zulu kamalandela. Zulu welembe. Ake siqoqe izikhali zengqondo singakhohliswa na ukubona kude asisibo thina. Asiqoqe umnotho lo ngowethu. Asithandane singacwasani kodwa sazi impi kayiphelile kuphela isukile emqondweni. Isukile ezandleni yanyukela emqondweni ngoba ngiyasola. Kunokwenzeka ukuthi ulwandle sasicasile ngendlela engabekezeleli imhlalo usikhafulela bona.
Yo. Hayi man. Hayi. Siyabonga futhi. Siyabonga.
Hayi shem.
Yo. Awuyalo sisi. Yo. Olha, sexta-feira.
Sala ubaba. Sexta-feira.
Abaye lokushinela amonde sexta-feira.
Abantu abasheshela bethi ngiyasemlutho.
Abaye namonde abaye sexta-feira.
Bethi ngiyasemlutho beyolusa abantu babesheshe.
Abaye namonde abaye sexta-feira.
Badlulise razo. Siyabonga, siyabonga,
Abaye
siyabonga.
namonde abaye sexta-feira.
Siyabonga mama.
Usukhokhelele phela.
Ya siyabonga mawucebisa imali yemoto.
Uqobo driver.
Ngiyona le moto ihlaza kabi.
Yazi mfethu uma ngibona ubambela mina kuphela ukuthi angikuqaqadolo ngithi mfethu uNkulunkulu akubusisa ngoba labo mama mfethu bavuka ngomnyama basebenza neti yona nto nabo bayiphilisa ngayo nabo bazama nje Nkosi yami ukubeka isinto etafuleni uyazi ngoba le ngane engaka nje lembewe kodwa ke mama amakhona ifiba beshamane akama
Yazi mfethu we-traffic inkinga zabandini. Amanye iy'nkinga zothando. Ayixakela ukuthanda labo sebezodwa nawo. Abanye abantu nje uthando luyindlela esingayiqondi. Esiyihamba ngokuyimpumputha sifunisela
Lalela-ke siya.
lokuthi ihleze sihamba nabo bayasazi isithetho sakho kodwa ngoba ukuhlwa kubiki uma sekufika sinokuqhubeka nohambo noma izimpawu sezisikhomba eweni. Mina namhlanje ukuhamba kwakho yikho sekudlule umngane lokungivakashela njalo uma inhlambela ngesithela mahlayeni sengikwazi ukubona ukuthi bephinde emqaleni ngiziphimbo lamakakani ezidlabeni bathandekayo ngihlushwa nami inhliziyo konje inhliziyo ethanda uyifundisa kanjani ukuyeka ukubona uthando lawo liholela ekufeni bona ufundisa kanjani ulwandle ukuye kubhubha uma sekwanele. Ngifisa ukuqhubeka nempilo kepha ngiyahluleka.
Oyedwa kuthweni.
Ngihlula ukuzakhela injabulo yothando. Njalo uma ngiphefumula nginokuzwa sengathi nezikhumbe ezihambe ezifukayo. Iyathunukala inhliziyo uma ngiyengezwe igama lakho.
Ufake phezulu umfakela isihlahlambe phezulu.
Khathazeka lithi
Ya cha izulu imali emoto.
bangena othandweni behleka ngakube nami sengibhale
Umshaba wakho 50 rand bangaphi? Umshaba u2. Bangaphi? About 3. 29 rand do.
Oke waba nami empilweni akaliyeki
Ah yes, very sure that. Yeah, sabi sinima phezulu.
azi kuphela ngalo igodi mhlathela ngivalelisa ngokungabaza engagqize eqakala ukungilandela esabona izinto ziningi etafuleni eshaya indiva amanzi namuhla kulugwadule nami kangisatholakali wena owabona abalobi beBhayibheli bethi mfuneni esenokutholwa useyokhothama ezithixweni zabezizwe noma engasathandi ngoba uphenduke ithempeli eliyimi umume wabaphangi kanti ukhona oyakuhlala
Ya sabi Shaka Mari. Shaka sabi. Ya sabi sorry mama.
sihambe imoto kwala ngisho ngizama
Yeah, put a shot.
Mana lapho engcweleni yezingcwele kufundela kuphela umpristi naye ezingcwelise ngokuhlambulula angazidli izinkanuko zenyama ukuze afumane ukukhonza kuleli thempeli nezicelo zakho uyakuziphathisa ngawuvumelekile beduze eze one Ngasimulo ikude nawe sithandwa sami sakudala ngiyakuxolela ukufunda ngami ukuthi asibonakali isidingo somoya ungakafiki emzuzwini wokuncisheka umphefumulo usufundele abezayo ke kimi kade kwaluka kunothile othanda ukwehluka kuwe okungimangaza ngaye udumisa abonge uNkulunkulu njalo uma ngike ngavula amehlo ngemva kokuxwayiza uthi ngisuke ngithathe isikhathi eside ukuwavula kanti unovalo lokuthi impilo uyakuphilelwa ubani uma ngingacimela unomphela welula izandla njalo uma ngiqhamuka nokwanga kwakhe kufuze ukubaba indodana welahleke kunobuqiniso bheka-ke mina ngingakaze ngiye ndawo kephizenzo zakhe zemihla ngiziyangidumisa khululeka sithandwa sami sakudala la washiya wone khona kade kwaluka buka-ke ngimatasa manje angikwazi nokukulalela sifoco
mina sengibhalwe emehlweni ukuthi uthando ngasese lesi siqubulo sandoda kayikhali sesakhe othandweni izolo bengingedwa ngilindele inhliziyo yami bengidamane nginqoma ngifakaza ngokuthi ebaya kodwa inembezo uthi inhliziyo ingumkhohlisi ikwazi ukuthanda nabanezimpawu zokuyiphula ngifisa nokuqala kabusha othandweni ongenani ngikwazi nokufaka izithombe zakhe emqondweni bafowethu konje ilanga ngicabela kanjani ukushisa lapha uzinanga uthini iziganyethu bazongahlobisa sibhakabhaka ngokufa sikuze umhloli sakwazi umzukulu eshiya inhliziyo egaba ngeshumi lopondo othandweni sithi nina kanti uthando seniyalithenga kaniphazikulekeli ngaveze yami ngathi kokunye kuhle sithande nangawo amaphakethe ezinhliziyo ziyazibala lana-ke zimbiwe insele yazishiya bonke laba banothando lweqiniso mabalibeke balongela inkathi ezayo lezi zixwayiso sokuthi liyoba ingcebo yabo uma sekuphelele leli lenkohliso saphela nesineke kodade lutho uthando lweqiniso engathi sikwaleli ikhasi sithethe isibili ngiyafanisa nezithombe ezilishumi ezinye zoze kazalala lutho umyeni namuhla ngihlangana noyindandatho kothando oluphelayo lesikhashana buya-ke sizoqala kabusha impilo yothando sithandwa buya sizoqhubeka le ngoma kangiyakuthanda ebesicula ezulwini zobusuku okungenani kuza inhliziyo yami ngenza ngikhole usasekuduze kwami imkhafaza nsuku zonke njengenjwayelo wawuthe uyongithanda ingulapha phakade. Mama. Nguna phakade selize lafika wangithanda. Ungishiya nje ngiyabafisa. Inhliziyo ikhala ngawe ngoba singithanda. Mama sasungikoma phela. Hayibo, ngeke phela umama lenkosi yangithinda nami nomama ngigcwele ngayo. Ngeke lekade phela yangithinda. Ekhuluma nawe. Siyabonga Mazalani. Kodwa ngibhedisa ngoba ngisho ngathi angibasele kanjani lokafika
izinhliziyo zisisa eweni. Sazi kahle ukuthi uthando kaluboni. Akoba khona oyedwa osinqakayo. Singafeli ezweni sibancane. Namuhla ngiphenduke isisulu senhliziyo edukayo. Intokozo yami ngukuguquguquka kwesimo sezulu namuhla. Ukuthanda umthwalo. Ingqondo yami ize yejwayela ubuhlungu kwangathi kungumgomo wempilo nginguSamson. Izinwele kazisekho ngiguqwe egameni lothando. Uma kungenzeka ngife kanye namafilisti. Angumfanekiso wovalo lwami lwemihla lokuthi angisekulubona uthando lweqiniso. Ungcono novalelisayo. Engathwele inhliziyo yakho ikhala ubuqobo. Valile inhliziyo ukuthi kungenzeka sokalunge nakulokhu isipiliyoni kasivame manga.
Naloku uthando salivelela ushiya lungasavalelisanga. Nakuba sesikhule ngejubane sajomba izigaba zempilo kepha kasinificanga. Izindlela ezinqamnela isithathile kwazona zisizanga. Izimpunge esasifice sibani sothando zathi bafowethu ngishiwe isikhathi. Silifanisa selosithele esitabeni okwelanga lozilahla konina ewuthina. Sisale sibamba izidongezwayo imvilo sothando sekukudala yadikibala. Sazakhela uthando ngemqondo nakuba inyama nemizwa kwalukhasha kusinqabela. Sihlule ukuthanda ngokucophelela, sathanda ngokuncamela, sazakhela amaqondana ngelo kusifanela. Ngokungazi ukuthi ubuhle bomuntu buyaziveza ebubini bakhe kanti nobubi bakhe bunokuziveza ebuhleni bakhe. Konke besikwenza kube sekuphetha ngokuphuka kwezinhliziyo nokugeleza kwezinyembezi. Umanjomane intombi engizalayo ithe kanti uthando seliyaphila nasemathuneni. Nakho Mfanafuthi enibangcwaba izolo ezihlizweni nibathanda kangcono kunezithandwa zenu zasemhleni.
Omunye wabahlobo bami ohambweni lokuzithola uke wathi isono asisikho ukubulala kepha inoma yini oyenza ngaphandle kothando. Usizi sewufisa ukulala kepha kuze kube mpondoza nkomo ushushuzela inhliziyo ilila. Akulaleki ngaphandle kwezilokotho zothandiweyo yejwayezwa nguwe umele. Kubuhlungu wena ukuhlala nenhliziyo ephukile. Ithunukala kakhulu uma ithotshwa. Ayimboni noze ngokuyihlenga kulapho isho khona abafana bayefana ungasoli. Inhliziyo ephukile ayikwazi ukubona ukuhluka kwabantu yinike isikhathi. Ngakho ngiyakuzifaka mina indandatho yezifundo zami ngibone ukuthi ngithembekile yini kimi ukuzifeza. Angiseku ukuphila ukuba
isimali sakhe ngisesimkhumbuze exam iyona leya
ngiyakugwema ukuzijezisa ngamafutha omunye. Uma kulula kuwe ukuphila ngaphandle kwami ubohamba ungabheki emuva. Uphile izinhliziyo ukhula nokhula. Nokubonakala kuqoqwa. Le phambili emendweni sithanda ngesibindi. Lapho silandela izinhliziyo zisisa eweni. Sazi ukuthi uthando kaluboni. Akoba khona okungenani oyedwa oyosika.
Izinto sesijike kabi la emhlabeni. Uyakhuluma nje ushiso ungazi ukuthi kwale ngoma yothando kayisakhuleki uze uyofika esiphethweni. Engane izihlambu zalo sisithunuka kakhulu ngasekuqaleni. wangenza mpilo wangiphuca ithemba othandweni ngafa impakabilo komkhovu mina lo sengathanda ngaphandle kwethemba ithemba nje lokuthi hleze ukhanya kuyongifica ngelinye ilanga ngilangikhona ngihlalela umnyama ongenafu ngithanda ngijeqeza nje engimshiya izolo unezimpawu eziphelele zongakhela umuzi uthando kalinasikole nampetha nathishela yabona lana sithanda sihlawumbisela silandela inhliziyo noma sezisikhomba khona eweni ayikho incazelo eqondile yothando njengoba nakule text engekho ngangitshela ukuthi yini ebamba iziganyezi uma singaweli emhlabeni yabona bafowethu ke ilanga ngiyonibhalela inkondlo lesithandani ezafa zithandana ngokweqiniso kodwa ifa lothando kazilishiyanga nasesizukulwaneni okulapha engafunda khona luyigugu kangakanani uthando okwenza noma uthola engathi ungaligoqa ngezandla zombili okweqanda ngoba uma like lawa kukancane ukuthola ithuba lesibili thina ke sikhulu uthando lumgomo ophoqayo kwakho umuzi namuhla yakhiwa ngaphandle kwalo kufeza isifundo zenyama kwaqeda leyo mizi ifadabale sizizukulwane esidukileyo siyavuma kodwa abanye abanacala bazalelwa ngaphandle kwemfudumalo yalo uthando abanye ke abalazi kwalona uthando kubona lubonakala ngcono uma liza kanye nemali kanti lusilimaza kakhulu uma sizifunza lona ngenkani ikhambi ke kukufundisa umlomo ukukhuluma okushiwe inhliziyo ngoba sinokuphambanisa okufunwa inhliziyo nokukhanga amehlo kwesikhashana ngilanje ngisasohambweni lami lokuthola onenhliziyo ehlanzekile ukuze ngizokholwa ile nganekwane ethi kwake kwaphila izigilosi ngaphambilini nalaba sebathanda ngaphambilini engathi bangabuyela kuthina basifundise ukwazi kanjani ukuphila nomuntu iminyaka ngaphandle koba isizathu sokulunguza nje kwezinyembezi zakhe abanye ke babuyile bathi uthando lumuqa nje omncane kunomehluko phakathi kokuthanda ngokubekezela nokuthanda uzibambezela masiqaphele
uyezwa sisi uyayithanda le ndaba uyachazeka sisi lokhu ihayile la ngemva kwakho ya ngibona uma matheka ngaphansi
umlomo wami nambeke iyiciko bengizocikoza ngiphendule nezingane noma ngingazazi ukuthi izalo ngubani yazi mangithi ngiyakubheka mama ngizwa kufikelwa luvalo ngoba nisifundisile nakusonisa indlela kepha-ke indlela ingabuzwa kanjani ngoba phambili angithi mama bona labona indlela
bambo
violence abashiwa abafowethu badonsa kakhulu kodwa dwethu basemaklabhini bayajayiva angithi baba bofisile bafake enkantolo ngamakhalabeni awesanga nakho abafowethu eduze kwakho mhlawumbe mama bakamfakazela kuzoba ninzi namadoda sikhala isilelo abesifazane bayasinyukubeza sihlukumezeka kakhulu abomthetho bayasikhiphavele bethi hayi hamba olungisa izinto
lalelani bafowethu thina usifo sasisihlonipha nje makushoniwe sasihlonipha sizila ngisho ensimini namhlanje ngibakhulu omncane emakhulu ngishoniwe namamatheka kangaka bafowethu anutholanga yini izolo umbiko wokuthi izolo inyanga ihlulekile ukuyihlenga ilanga izolo ilanga lishonile naxwaya ngishothi kanibonanga noma iy'ntaba senzila ngobumnyama engani nesibhakabhaka sikhalile nathi imvule beniyikhulekele befanele nifunde noma kubaleka izikolo konjani nathi nangena ubusika kulungile lamakhaza ke lawo beniwabona bekuyibika lokuthi kunesidumbu esitinde ukufihlwa ngokuza kube buhlungu ngafikweni bangane engcwabeni izihlobo nabomndeni okuyiziganyezi bebephume ngobuningi bezovalelisa kulanga ukubuhlungu benu nje baphathi ney'nsizwa bezimbithi unakalanga kaziqedanga zithi ziphazamiswe ukuhlangana negolide emathinjini omhlaba zayeka ngokungafiki kuyena emngcwabeni magagu sibe sicela amankankansi asayile unoyani ihubo lokufa besothi ngoba kanjani ilanga umhlabathi emhlabathini uthulo othulini umlotho emlotheni kulungile uhambe kahle langa hleze sokubona ngelinye ilanga kodwa ilanga lenze okumnandi emva kwezithuko ezithathu labuye kwendodana lavuka lathi mina bengazange ngashona bengifuna ukubona isimilo senu ngaphandle kwami nina niyangilahla mina uma ngasekho niphila ukamazithande niyakhohlwa inyanga engumqaphi naye imbhekile umsindo kawuvuleki makushoniwe
yazi mfethu makhuluma nje vele babengekho sasingekho nami ngekho mhlawumbe nawe futhi wawungekho le ndaba vele thina sizwe emlandweni sixoxa emabhukwini mhlawumbe nathi sisofunde emabhukwini
Wazizi.
Phela vele nathi singabazaliwe savude sibelethweni komama. Manje ke ngaphandle kanembeza bese ngakwazi kanjani ukuthi mina kayikho into engisengayikhuluma. Angithi vele inkinga umakhelwane wami. Ngikhuluma nje lokhu ngisuke epoint. Umama akazange akunikeze ngisho sawubona. Nokho akungithusi.
Woza bafrag.
Sanike yona le ncwadi engcono kwathatha umakhelwane. Amvulele. Njengalokhu uyithanda wena. Mawami ngiyakuthanda.
Mayethu.
Kodwa phela kubuhlungu ngoba kwamakhelwane siyahluleka ukuthi sibakhombise uthando esinalo ngakho. Kodwa ke manje inkinga kamakhelwane uhlele ekhaya hambe sizakala ngoba uvele hambe xoxana bonke abantu athi hayi-ke nimbona-ke nje phela usephutha umkhaba angithi usephutha isisi ayazosho ukujikana elanga ngoba uvukanga-ke uphuma ngomnyama uzozwa ngayena sihambe memezela ave sayitshela
Hi, boss, sister, this one. Okay, correct. Sam. Hi, Okay, all right.
Hey, amazilemanela zingengoma le eyaculwa kusa salalela inganekwane. Ilitshele kantonja mbili ayifuna ngabantu ifuna izinkonja zane zindisa.
Oza Yesizwe ngalo. Oza base. Siyasebenza sinomfaka khona mfethu.
Behubo lezinganekwane. Ngingumntwana weAfrika kulesizukulwane. Ukwasukasukela isikole sami sokuqala. Iphimbo likagogo eyixoxa kungathi okokugcina. Ngingumphumela wezimfundiso zabamnyama. Ngizungeza iziko ngomnyama. Simpheka ngogozwane. Ayihuba ayihaye owami ugogo. Gogo ungayeki bungafikile ubuthongo ngiphelezele. Kwakunohleko olungenakuqa. Ngangiphelele eziko ngingenasono. Ngingubumtshoti behubo lezinganekwane. Ngangingumntwana weAfrika kulesizukulwane.
Ngizizigi zenkohliso singenisa ngezituba zabambisholo. Hayibo. Sanyama nambana nenhlonipho kwakumasile ngezondo edlangayo. Ngisehlane ngibokhala kepha kukhona munye ongizwelayo. Saqhakambisa labezizwe sanyanyeleza ibala. Zulu khumuza abakhohliwe ingwe idla ngamabala. Ukhamba lakuphika imbiza. Safuqa izifo ekubeni usifulalo ukuthaka izimbiza. Vuka Zulu kusile ilanga liphumile isibhakabhaka sixwathile. Kungani okuningi konakala ubhekile. Izintombi zakuleshilela izitshizo sebeni lomfula. Abesifazane bagcwele amasimi bafuna nokunokuba. Abakhapheyane bagcwele nezimfuyo kwaluseni ngenxa yendlala ebhokile emadlelweni. Kome nabasemthonjeni. Zulu mawusondeza isipunga nazi sibukela buqamama. Saphuqaphuqwa indlala inqolobane yomitlama. Imvula kanomkhulu negoze sizukulwaneni. Iziphepho zabezizwe zaqotha ezibayeni. Ukhamba lanqwaqa nengwebu. Sabizwa ngegama lakho kepha sahluka kwena ngenswebu. Amakhulu aphambuke sathole ngeqoma. Ayisebakhulu intombi kithi bakuza umhlola sesikoma. Amaliba ngenxa kwesiqola. Izulu lahloma iminikwane kwaze kwaduma. Faka isandla amageba ngenelela. Nenduku isigade kwazela maluju kuwe siyasikhalela.
Oshwenga maketango othando lobunkondlo ngokubulala ubugwala kamxolisi ngizosukuma ngizihayele vele yimi umfakazi omkhulu. Inkosi yembono ngivalela ulahla ihluthulelo kude vele isigwebo sami singifanele udilinga mahloni ngoba ngimile kuleli dwala elakhiwe indunduma yamazwi ngokugqibelana kwezidedeliwe isithunywa zamagama efika samfihla badale lendlu lamqonde lethu umqondo oqondile kepha eqondwa yilaba abazinika isikhathi nengqondo zungangibalekeli siba zungangilahli khasi okungenalihlala namphepha kanye nepeni elokhu imnjunju yenzwa yobuhlungu yokushwalazela abalaleli sengihayile bezwa kepha bengashintshile nokho ngale mbono ngisavuma ukuba isiqondo yehlanye bezi sibaningi isihayile nezandla ishayile kepha lutho ushintshile le nkondlo yami iza njengesexwayiso sikanova kasibangaka bayongena kulo mkhumbize Gabriel Yasenga lalela Sindiswa ngalamazwi aphuma emlonyeni kaSindiswa.
Kodwa kusala ugcina usuku nangisagcwele ngawo.
Hayi nkosazana kulungile mnyaka masi yabonga ngobuciko bakho ucikozile vele ubuciko bakho ibona wavunjela bona spiritual sikama wakho. Mina ukubona ikuthombe ngiyiciko bengizocikoza ngoba
Yeah, sabonkhona behlamba bavulele akhona phezulu khona behlanga.
Zawulahla nezakadalawana. Hayi nami ngiyawulahla lo mthwalo umthethe.
Correct, my friend.
Kodwa nginishiya nodwa nginishiya nawo lo mlomo. Vele umlomo wangizwe seyinhloko. Bafuthi kulungile uthando sasonke.
Siyabonga.
And we're back. I hope you enjoyed that. That was City Sounds and Poetry, directed by Musa Hlatshwayo, with poet Sindiswa Zulu, Mfanafuthi Pota Shange, and Imbongi Yomoya, also Thokozani Mbuyisa. We are joined tonight by director Musa Hlatshwayo. Musa is the director of a company called Maiso Productions. It's an internationally acclaimed contemporary dance and theater performance company based in KwaZulu-Natal. He is also the winner. In 2016, he was awarded the Eric Shabalala Dance Championship Award. And in 2018, he was the Standard Bank Young Artist Award winner for dance. We are also joined this evening by two of the poets, Sindiswa Lady Africa Zulu. Welcome. Sindiswa is the author of Maine. She's a female poet, author, columnist, events organizer, facilitator, and public speaker, also from Durban. She facilitates poetry classes for high school students and is a columnist on Umaka online magazine. Pota Yamela, one of the poets who was also in the taxi, is with us tonight. He is a facilitator, event organizer. He is also the founder of Iziko Lagamama, yes, Lamagama art movement, and a well-established poet in the Durban area. He's also an organizing team member of a Manguni art show and Sabanguni poetry slam. I'm just going to ask the other panel members to introduce themselves before we go to a discussion with Musa about the project, and then we will continue with the poets. Can we hear from Donna, please? Not there. Okay. So Musa, we'll go to you. If you would like to enlighten us as to the creation of this project and give us a little bit of background on how the project came to be.
Thank you, Valma. Greetings to everyone. Well, I think we all know that this year we celebrate the 25th anniversary of Poetry Africa, and sadly it happens during such a time where our movement and expression is very limited because of the COVID virus. So what happened was the director of the Center for Creative Arts approached me with, questions around how I think we could, make this year's Poetry Africa better than what we have seen before. And he was posing these questions with basically two projects or tasks in mind. The first one was working towards creatively directing the official opening of Poetry Africa, which we all saw. But then from there, we moved towards asking questions around how we can possibly mobilize communities through poetry and how Poetry Africa can reach out and really stretch its arms far longer than it has, especially during such a time. Taking poets into a taxi or a mobile facility that could move around into the city and be face-to-face with people then came as an idea that we then started toiling with. We then looked at the idea of taking poets into a taxi and exploring these beautiful words, these ideas, these concepts that our beautiful poets always express through their work, but also kind of finding that parallel with these visual poems that are embedded within the spaces and the places that we inhabit. In this case, Durban being one of them. So from there, Sipindile Hlongwa, the curator of Poetry Africa, then started, being part of these discussions where we then started looking at who it is that we think could come into a collaborative process in terms of making this project, what it is that, we had in mind. And so the poets that you see then were suggested. And from there, I also then suggested that we perhaps throw in Thokozani Mbuyisa as our wild card, with his responses as somebody who recites maybe from the need to respond to what he is feeling at that point, what is happening at that point, and most importantly, what his spirit guide informs him to do. So the work that you just saw, therefore, is an experiment that was a culmination of all these conversations, all these questions, and all these interactions with the people that were involved.
That's fantastic. What a great expression it was. And, I am calling to mind, before we go to the poets, at first I thought this is like installation art, but then it occurred to me, this is public art. This is art that is engaging the public, but foisted on the public unbeknownst to them. So what a fantastic execution. I love taxis. I think it's the most extraordinary space. And I think when I watch this film, what I see is what a free space you have to recite your poetry. There's absolutely almost no reaction from the public, except a bit of clapping and a little bit of this and that. But in any other space, it would never occur in that way. A taxi is like a free stage. And I thank you all for that presentation. We'll go now to, we'll start with Sindiswa. Sindiswa, if you'd like to speak about your experience as a poet, and then after we'll go to Pota.
First and foremost, I was so frightened.
when they first called me at Poetry Africa, my initial idea was I was going to be on the main lineup, but then they explained to me that there's an extension show that we're going to be shooting, and it's going to be about city sounds. Well, since the theme is around unmuting the power to the poet, so it was, for me, I didn't expect this. And then we spoke with the director. He explained, and I was like, shush, what's gonna happen? Because I'm just one of those people that I don't even perform most of the time in weddings, those places where people didn't anticipate that they're going to be in a poetry space. Just like church, there are people who go out and evangelize, and then there are teachers of the word, you know, those who wait for people to come. I'm that type of a preacher who preaches to the people who are already here. So it was kind of a challenge to me. I humbly say this, my ego was a bit bruised because of, well, you know, I'm in my comfortable space. I've been doing poetry for more than a decade, and I'm used to stand in front of people who actually paid to go. Yes. They value poetry, and I'm thinking, what's going to happen? What if one of these people feel maybe feel that my poetry is saying something against them or whatever? They're not comfortable. And especially because in order to achieve what we had to achieve, a camera had to be involved. So I had my doubts there and there, but my overall experience, I would say, well, after the whole project, I said, yeah, I did it. So there is no stage that I'll say I fear from now on.
Well, you did an extraordinary job. I mean, I'm sure you're used to, as you said, performing, you know, performing your poetry in a paid venue where people appreciate your work. And I could see you were, you know, reciting your poems, but you had to wear a mask. You're in a public space. You can't interact. You're looking forward. Everyone else is looking forward. So, but what an extraordinary experiment and activation, because no matter what everybody was doing in the taxi, they had to hear your words. So thank you for that. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Pota, tell us what your experience was like, please, and just enliven us a little bit about how you experienced working with Musa and with Sindiswa and the other poets.
Hi everyone. It was a great experience. It was a different platform to perform on. And I received the call, and Spindile explained to me. I was like, here we go again, because I have a little bit of experience of such performance, because once we were fundraising as an organization, so we used to perform on the train stations and on the moving train. So when I received the call and the project was explained to me, I said, here we go again. The unattention paid audience, you know, and like, what's gonna be this time? Because such performances are very emotionally and so attached to the experience that you have, and emotionally attaching, because you find that there are times where you perform and you feel like people are not listening to you, and you're saying, this is my precious poem, you know, people should listen to me, and you yes, you feel the space. But it was a great experience, not knowing how people will express themselves and how they will respond to your performance in a taxi, performing to ordinary citizens who are not aware of your performance that you're going to be sharing on the taxi. One great experience that has taught me and get me to be more stage matured.
Wonderful. I think from what I could see, no matter what people expressed or didn't express, it is a fantastic opportunity for people to hear your poetry, whatever they think of it. What a glorious thing. they'll go home and talk about it. They'll tell their friends, you know, the strangest thing happened in this taxi today. So that is amazing. I'm going to go back to Musa now to talk more about how long it took to execute the project, what it was like filming on the streets in the taxi, and how that experience worked for all of you.
Well, I think it's usually very difficult to kind of speak about how long a project took, because I think things start happening way before such interactions happen. Because my experience, for instance, with performance in unconventional spaces goes as far back as my university days. And then it just so happened that when the Center for Creative Arts was planning the 25th Poetry Africa, then I find myself receiving these phone calls from Spindile and Ishmael. And of course, the conversation becomes easier because of my awareness and or my training in performance in unconventional spaces, be it in visible theater, forum theater, or whatever it is. It then kind of, works with the idea. So it's difficult to then say how long it took without crediting that. But I would say before we met the poets, we spent about 2 weeks just discussing the idea amongst ourselves, Spindile, Ishmael, and myself. And then we got the poets involved, and we had to have about 2 or 3 Zoom meetings, obviously, because we're all from diverse spaces. We couldn't meet physically. I also do acknowledge, dedication from people like Sindiswa, who, even while she was attending a family funeral, she literally had to step aside while the proceedings were going on to literally log in and attend to that Zoom meeting where we were planning how we're going to do this and that and that. Wow. And so, all of that, you think about all those layers, and you do not want to discredit them because they all contributed towards
Absolutely.
this. Of course, we met on, the actual day where we then needed to discuss the idea in terms of how things were now going to practically unfold, because we had the theory or the idea or the concept on pen and paper, but we now needed to discuss it practically without over rehearsing it. So we therefore created a structure, and we resorted to using WhatsApp as our means of communication should we need to communicate in cases of emergency. And then we engaged the driver, and the taxi came, and we started working. Fantastic. It was also interesting for me to have to discuss the idea with, for instance, our videographer, Keegan Baines, who is also a dancer and choreographer, and to actually get him to come and be part of this journey in a space and an environment that, as a white South African, while he was born and raised in Durban, but he's still not familiar with, to actually come and experience this journey and, be behind the camera, but also step away and be part of the experience was also mind-boggling for him and for all of us. So it really was a challenge that was enriching to all of us.
Well, that is wonderful that you raised that point. So I myself, as I said, I love the taxis. I'm in Cape Town, but I have taken the taxis, and I love them because I acknowledge the fact that the majority of people travel by taxi, and yet so few people who don't have to travel by taxi ever experience the joy and the beauty and the strength. And what I have experienced, as you mentioned, is this incredible space, this opening space for the driver, the gachi, as we call them in Cape Town, the guy who opens the door and closes the door. I don't know what you call them in KZN. The beauty of that free space, because everyone in a taxi is allowed to just be. There is almost no judgment, which is phenomenal, because that's a very rare, it's a very rare space in South Africa, particularly, where there's no judgment. Who you are, how you are, what you come with, what you leave with, all of it totally cool. So I salute you for that. Also, if you did have a cameraman who is a dancer, who is not familiar with the beauty of traveling in a taxi and the joy and the overwhelming stimulation of having all that noise and all those people coming and going. Add to that, of course, your poetry. That is incredible. So now we can just open the conversation widely if people would like to contribute. I don't know if Donna would like to jump in and say anything. Otherwise, maybe the poets again can speak to, I know you mentioned that, Sindiswa, I know you mostly perform in, proper stage poetic presentations. So that must have been a very interesting perspective for you. As you said, it was a bit difficult. And I know Pota mentioned he's done train station and live activations where people also just walk past you and don't even look at you because they think you're proselytizing. But maybe let's just see, let's let the conversation go organically about your experiences as poets.
I'd also like to mention that somewhere in the taxi there was like a guy who was a bouncer, which just in case things happen, so that was so thoughtful of Poetry Africa CCA to actually think about our safety.
True.
That was so thoughtful of them. And I remember just that the video was edited. And I remember there was a time where there was a little, I was not comfortable a bit because when we were on West Street, some guys were outside the taxi. They were just sitting. I should think maybe they are involved in the taxi industry or something like that. So they saw a camera and they were thinking we are actually filming them. And
I see.
so
yes, true.
Yeah, so they were thinking not we, because I was a passenger. They didn't know that we are together. So what happened is the guys started saying, hey, why are you filming us? We can even take that camera right now. And then the bouncer jumped in and I was like, yeah, for the first time I have a bodyguard. I was so comfortable.
You thought this is a good idea. I like it. I like the bodyguard. Yeah.
Like for the first time, I have a bodyguard, But I also learned that it's not only the art, it's some other things that you wouldn't think of that contributes in such a beauty. Because as much as we didn't see that part, but it's part of city sounds because and then when we were doing debriefing, we were like, guys, did you see director was like, did you see what was happening there? Actually the guys talked about how they do not want to be filmed because they were in jail, so they are thinking someone is spying on them. And on that time of an incident, we were thinking, we are the bad people, but no, they have their own issues and they know someone from the taxi, so they are not sure what's happening. Are we being followed? Are we filmed? Because so there's a lot that happened besides what we saw. Obviously it had to be cut short, but I really did experience city sounds, and I really felt that opportunity coming to me, that my power should be unmuted as a poet. Beautiful. I need to be heard because all these things are answered so that our country may move forward.
Yes, and speaking to that, thank you so much, Sindiswa. Your poetry, the content of your poetry, that is something we haven't touched on. And I don't know to what degree the poets were curated, but your poetry was super strong and fantastic. I loved how you spoke about the colonizers and the fact that they've taken everything from us and we let them in and they're from the West and they haven't left. And I loved it. I loved what you said. We're making spears. We're making our own spears, We're making handmade spears. It's brilliant. I couldn't believe that nobody was reacting. I mean, okay, not everybody speaks the same language. Maybe they weren't understanding what you were saying. Maybe they weren't engaging. But Pota, please speak to those things. Also, I don't think some of your poetry, I didn't have subtitles, so I apologize. I didn't understand what you were saying. Perhaps you can speak to that.
Like I said, it was great experience. When you take a look at facial expression, interaction of the passenger, you can tell now that they were listening to us. You know, we had great time. All that Sindiswa has mentioned was part of our experience, part of our great performing, and also there were times where we collaborated some sort with Sindiswa, and that for me was so great because it showed how our poetry, our individual poetry, can connect and communicate one message. You know, it was love poem that Sindiswa had shared, and I had to jump in and share my poetry, and it somehow looked like a collaboration, or it somehow looked like a response. Also, Thokozani was so great, so much that he would also just touch base and sum up all the performance that we've just done, and that's diversity and flexibility of other poets and the audience responding to us was super great for me. It was great experience, and it matches the theme. The theme says I'm muting poetry, and then I'm muting words, so stuff. And for me, it says we're performing in different spaces. Yes, we're performing in different spaces where we need to be heard in ranks, in everywhere, for people to know and enjoy poetry. People will know and take poetry as a career. So for me, it's a great experience. I think it's 4 days back. I was in town, and I met somebody who was in a taxi, and this lady looked at me and said, "You were reciting in the taxi?" And I said, "Yes." And she expressed how she was so excited to listen to poetry that we did. And I said, wow, we made and we left the mark, and we left the mark and made the impact on the taxi. So I'm so grateful for the experience. I'm so grateful for the chance. I'm so grateful for the platform. And as we say, it is not about us being comfortable on the stage, but it's about us being able to reach, you know. So it's sharing the poems, sharing the space, and getting to touch base on my other side of uncomfortable zone.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you, Pota. That was amazing. And I'll go back to you now, Musa. I really believe that in a way your words have healed people. The session we had last night very much talked about the power of words. Okay, so speaking power to the poet. The poetry that you delivered in a public space will affect everyone as the words fall on them, like you dance, Musa. You know, when people see dance, it's an expression, it's an art form that touches them. Poetry also and words can touch people, even if they don't respond, and even if you don't get a reaction. You know, those words, I'm sure, are singing in their head for quite a long time. So perhaps we can speak a little bit about the impact that you hope was fostered by this engagement. If you would like to speak to that, Musa?
Look, I think the first thing is I would like to come in from a different angle and say there was no point where I felt like people were not responding, because the choice to not vocalize what you are feeling is also a reaction. And being in that space right there and there was, of course, a totally different experience to how somebody else that might have not been in a taxi and who's watching this through the screen might see it. The thick silence that we had and that we experienced in certain moments in that taxi was louder than any huge bang that you could hear. The groans and moans and the smiles and the choices to look away, wow, they were all a reaction that we all saw and we felt and we experienced. But also in moments where, for instance, somebody might have, you know, been closer to a poet and a poet was reciting something, we could all see, for instance, when things moved towards being a lot more personal for that person, because we are part of a city and a province where fortunately we speak the same language and we, you know, are part of the same culture with people. And so we understand the body language, we understand the nuances, we understand what it means for somebody to just be silent in that manner and understand that as a means of responding and going deeper into your own personal whatever. So I just needed to clarify that for us, absolutely at no point did we feel like our audience was disconnecting with us, but instead we felt like we really were diving deeper into certain personal spaces, and at times we're just kind of lightening the atmosphere where people felt it was okay to laugh and to giggle, and it was okay for our taxi driver and our conductor to literally just interact with the people a lot more nicer than they might be used to. And that again is part of the impact. And I really would like to thank the poets for, you know, trusting this idea and the vision and, you know, giving them, giving their own and allowing us, myself and the Center for Creative Arts, to literally immerse them into an experience like this. The words, the ideas, the concepts of their work are powerful on their own, but when parallel to the sounds of the city and the landscape of the city and the movement of the city, as we have just said, it is something that is going to continue lingering in many people's lives.
Exactly. And, you know, again, the resonance of the view, and I have to say it was very beautifully shot. You did a gorgeous job. It was nicely executed. I loved the whole immersive experience of being in the taxi with you. It was fantastic because I know what it's like, but other people don't. And the view from the taxi and the view of the taxi rank and all the places you stopped and the interaction with the public, you know, the markets and the women on the side, it's beautiful. I was thinking the whole time I was watching it, we haven't spoken of the landscape, but this is the landscape of the city. And this is the landscape where you live. And this is the landscape of the people in the taxi. So that was phenomenal. And it was beautifully executed. The film was nicely done, great editing. And you really felt like you'd been in like a Jim Jarmusch movie, you know, the day in the life of a taxi driver in New York City. So I got that whole KZN vibe, Durban vibe, beautifully done. So I guess to wrap it up, if anyone would like to say anything, go ahead.
So I just wanted to say just one last thing. I think the one other layer that was worth bringing into the whole concoction for me was selecting a playlist of music that kind of collaborated with the idea that we were working towards. Obviously, the one thing that we needed to be cautious of is the fact that, you know, we can't just take or select any piece of music that is right protected, because this is going to be broadcast, you know, through the various platforms. But to have to curate a list of music by young Durban-based artists that are not yet signed, and to actually realize that people are now moving away from writing music for the sake of it being music, but they are making a conscious choice to actually write music that speaks about let the land come back, you know, music that speaks about the booming culture of how we've got Black men that are buffing up, you know, and creating this comical sound that says, you know, Imbongi Yomoya, the dance of the feet guys. Music where you would take what we know as the national anthem and what we know as the sounds of Maskandi and creating this beautiful new sound that speaks about this freedom, and it keeps questioning what this freedom is. So that again, was another layer that I consciously needed to bring into this project, because it speaks about the culture of artistic expression in Durban that seeks to unmute the power of the artist.
Beautiful, beautifully said. And that is another aspect of the experience, which I have to say, as you mentioned, it does not, because the music is so integral to the presentation, you hear it. Of course, there's always music in a taxi, but luckily you didn't pick Tony Braxton or anything that these taxis generally play. So that was wonderful, because I knew the music was playing in the background, but it was just the perfect layering for the poets, for the driver, for the interactions, for the phone conversations, for the reactions on camera. There was enough, like you said, there was enough silence to absorb the poetry, and there was enough interaction with the driver and with the passengers getting in and out. It was beautifully, beautifully executed. I thank you all for a fantastic delivery. And I'm sorry, all the poets were not here to join us this evening, but I thank you so much, all of you, for Sounds of the City. It is a brilliant expression of talent, and it's really wonderful to meet all of you. Thank you, Musa, for bringing this project to life. Thank you, Pota and Sindiswa, for your participation. We would like to thank our generous sponsors, UKZN, the CCA, of course, for bringing Poetry Africa in its 25th year to our audiences, the KZN Department of Arts and Culture, the French Institute of South Africa, and Total Energies. We thank you all for supporting the arts, and thank you for bringing the arts to the people. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.